Hi, I'm Yen Chen. Welcome to Career Choices, where you learn about different professions and make informed decisions on your career choices. Email us at qip.career.choices@gmail.com. Do you ever wish that you could play an instrument or be the cool teacher to give students a music lesson? Or be a member of an orchestra to enjoy the audience at each performance? Our guest today has done all that. Mrs. Judy Silverman is the Associate Principal Emeritus Viola with the National Philharmonic Orchestra. She has her own teaching studio in Rockville, Maryland. Mrs. Silverman has written and performed children's concerts at libraries, schools, and benefits for the National Philharmonic Orchestra. She has chaired numerous string competitions and festivals and served as an adjudicator for Maryland State Music Teacher Association, DC Music Teachers Association, just to name a few. Mrs. Silverman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you have done a lot. You play with the National Philharmonic Orchestra. You also teach, and you also chair music competitions. Seems like you got so many different roles, quite busy. Can you tell me about all different things that you do, and what's your day like?
Sure, it's a very interesting question. My day varies depending on what activities I have. The orchestra that I play with is a part-time regional orchestra. And we do 11 performances, 11 or 12 different programs in a year, and each program takes about 11 hours, 9 to 11 hours of practice during that week. So it's more than possible to have some students in that week and to also help volunteer at teachers' organizations with adjudication or helping running programs, competitions.
So I guess your schedule is quite flexible. It depends on what you want to do or what happens around that time.
It does, and actually there was a time when I had a much busier studio, and about 8 years ago I decided to cut back a little bit to have more time to spend with my husband on fun activities for our partial retirements. But I still have plenty of time to teach the students and adults that I teach.
So when you play with the orchestra, I guess you do practice a lot, so you need to spend a lot of time together, I guess.
We actually are mailed the music for the program about 2 or 3 weeks in advance, and we're expected to prepare that music on our own. So when we go into our first orchestra rehearsal, we may only have one rehearsal for each work, and we only have perhaps 3 days of rehearsal, 3 2-hour periods or 2.5-hour periods to rehearse. That's mostly for establishing the finer points of the music and being sure we're playing together or we're doing what the conductor wants us to do. But we have to be well practiced so that we're prepared for the actual concert.
I see. So actually you had to spend a lot of time on your own for practicing.
We do. And besides, musicians always have to spend a lot of time practicing. You just can't, it's not the kind of thing where you can go to school and establish your skills by the time you're 25 or 35 and then stop practicing. You have to maintain your skills in order to play well, and that means regular practicing all the time.
How often do you practice, or how much time do you practice?
It varies. I would say that I play most every day.
Oh,
and the
wow.
practice time could be anything from 1 hour to 2 or 3 hours, depending on what I'm preparing for. There might be some days when I don't practice for a special reason, but mostly it's something that I've just done all the time, all of my life.
So you play for the orchestra. For this group you're with, do you have to travel a lot?
I don't have to travel with this orchestra. There was a time when we did do some, they're called runouts, where you might go and play someplace else. But right now, we're not doing that. We're based at the Music Center at Strathmore. We give programs for all the second graders in Montgomery County, in addition to our regular subscription series. We sometimes do extra concerts. Sometimes another group will rent us. And for instance, the Wynton Marsalis Lincoln Center Jazz Group is coming to Strathmore, and the National Philharmonic will be the backup orchestra for that concert.
Oh,
so
right.
that happens sometimes too.
Okay, so I guess it depends on which group, which orchestra you're with. Currently, the one you're with does not travel a lot, but there's a possibility that travel could be frequent.
There certainly are orchestras where they expect their musicians to be able to go on tour. That is very common with major orchestras, and it's also common with the military orchestras. We have many of those in the DC area too. They go on tour and give concerts in other countries and in other states.
Now let's go back to how you get to this point. So why do you want to play an instrument, and why viola?
Well, that's a really interesting question because I didn't really want to play viola as a child. In my family, everybody played an instrument. My father played, my mother played the piano. We had musicians in the family, and my siblings and I all were expected to play an instrument, and we weren't expected to necessarily go into music, but my father was really a believer, both my parents, that amateur musicians had tremendous amount of fun with their instrument. They could enjoy making music and meeting people. So we grew up with a lot of music from a young age. And as a matter of fact, with my siblings and myself, we formed a string trio and a quartet with my father and played on Voice of America when I was very young.
Oh, wow.
And played in churches and did some both amateur playing and a little bit of professional playing. I didn't think about playing the viola until I was older, until actually after I married, when I joined an orchestra where they had no violists. And my father had given me a viola, and I thought, well, that might be fun to do. So I decided to play viola.
Was that a good transition or difficult transition from violin to viola?
There are some differences between the instruments, but there's enough similarity so that it wasn't really that challenging to do. I did decide at that point that I wanted to take lessons from a violist, and I actually did. At an older age, I actually did study with the violist because I had never studied professionally viola. And it was at that point then, after I studied, that I decided to audition for the National Philharmonic on viola.
Why did you plan on being professional, I guess? Because you did mention that, hey, I guess it's fun to play as amateur, but why professional?
Right, it's really interesting because after I left college, I worked for the Department of Labor doing something completely different. But I had always studied the violin, and my teachers had recommended that I actually teach. And I've always loved teaching. From the time I was a very young child, I've taught children how to ride bikes and how to do all kinds. I just always loved working with children. I taught dance, and teaching was just something that was very special. After I had children, it seemed as if having a career as a private music teacher in my home and freelancing would work out very well with having children, better than having a full-time job with a government agency. And so just little by little, as my children were growing up, I got more and more students, and I did more and more freelance playing, and that's how it happened.
Oh, wow. So does that, you apply to National Philharmonic Orchestra. Do you need any special, I guess, education or training or experience before you can really get into
Right.
profession?
That's a really excellent question. I think the most important thing to get into, the most important quality a musician can have to take an audition and get into an orchestra is to be able to play extremely well. That's especially true of the major orchestras. So most people have a very traditional trajectory for getting to that point. After they graduate high school, they go to a music conservatory. They may get a bachelor's in performance of their instrument, maybe even a master's degree. They study with major teachers, and then when they get out of school, they take a lot of auditions and hope that they get into an orchestra, a major orchestra that will support them. These jobs are hard to come by, and the music schools are putting out a lot of students who are very, very well qualified. To get into the National Philharmonic was a little bit different because it's a part-time orchestra. The people that play with the National Philharmonic do other things. They teach, or they may be freelancing all around the area in other jobs. But the bottom line is, when you take an audition, you have to be able to play very, very well. Usually at an audition, there are required pieces that you have to play in addition to a concerto. So they're not really interested necessarily in where you went to school or who your teachers are, although obviously the best prepared people for major symphonies have been to conservatories and have studied with major teachers. So it varies depending on the group.
Does that matter like what kind of piece you play during the audition?
Usually they tell you what to play.
Oh,
so
wow.
they will give you a list of maybe 12 excerpts from famous pieces that they want you to play, and then they may ask you to play 1 or 2 movements of major concertos. Very often it's behind a screen. It's a very formal situation. And there are rounds where there's a first round and then a finals round. Usually you don't get to pick what you want to play in an audition.
So basically, you will get a list ahead of time so you could practice,
Yes.
really practice. And it's sort of like a blind audition behind the screen so they don't really know what you look like and all that stuff.
Sometimes they even tell the women they have to take off their shoes so that they won't hear heels clicking, so that they don't know if it's a woman or a man.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yes.
So let's take a break right now, and we'll continue with the discussion. We'll be right back after the message.
Packers.
Viking.
Packers.
Viking.
Viking.
Red state, blue state, vegan,
Carnivore.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
downtown.
Optimist.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we create real, lasting change in the building blocks of life. The education, income, and health of our communities,
Live.
our families,
United.
even the person next to us.
Live united.
Real change won't happen without you. So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up at liveunited.org.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to Career Choices. Today we have invited Mrs. Judy Silverman to talk about her experience or life being a musician. You have a lot of different experience, or you do a lot of different things, and one of them is chair the music competition. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. With my husband, both of us are volunteer. My husband is also a cellist. I mean, he's a retired psychologist, but a cellist. We actually met in an orchestra when I was about 15 years old.
Wow.
And together, we've been very active with the Friday Morning Music Club in running the Johansson International Competition for young string players ages 13 to 17. And I'm the chairman of that committee, and Paul is a very active volunteer with that. And it's a very, very thrilling experience to run this competition that attracts the finest young musicians from all over the world, from Shanghai and Armenia and Spain and Czechoslovakia. And we get many, many tapes, and we narrow it down to about 30 semifinalists who come to Washington, D.C. and play for very prestigious judges. And then finalists are selected, and we offer $67,000 in prize money. So it's a wonderful triennial competition every 3 years. It takes a lot of time to plan it and organize it and raise the money for it, and it's funded by a private trust. So that takes a lot of volunteer time for both Paul and me together. For other music organizations, I serve as a volunteer like a lot of music teachers do, where we run festivals and small competitions for local students. But it's very rewarding. But I do have to say that the most rewarding thing that I do with my music in addition to playing in this part-time orchestra, really is to work with teaching adults and students. That's where I've always had the most fun and find the most rewarding.
So I know that you're still teaching, but probably reduce that. Tell us about that, the teaching part. I
Right.
know you mentioned
Right.
enjoy
Right
that.
now I have just maybe 4 children students and maybe 4 adult students, but I used to have a very, very large studio of over 40 or 50 people. But it's still wonderfully rewarding to start kids when they can hardly play at all and then see them advance and play chamber music on their own and join orchestras. And some of my former students are now teaching in the Washington
wow,
area.
that's nice.
Some have gone on to music conservatory. Some of them are now fellow musicians in National Philharmonic. So I guess when you get to be my age, you see the long view of what your career has meant, not only to the people that you've taught, but also to the community in general. It's been incredibly rewarding.
That's good. Now, we talk about rewarding. We know your husband also played cello, but he actually find a real job. He normally joked with us that, well, he had to do something else.
In order
so
to
he
support the family.
That's right. So
But
can you
it's
tell
true
us
in a
about
way.
that?
He's a major supporter of the arts. You know, the thing is about when you first start out teaching, you only have a couple of students, you're not making very much money, and of the money, of the hourly fee that you get when you teach, there is no vacation pay, there's no health insurance, there's no vacation time, there's no sick leave. As a matter of fact, that's fairly much true of the part-time orchestra job. So it is true for those of us that are lucky enough to have devoted spouses that are willing to work hard to make it possible for us to do this with the arts. It is wonderful that I've had a husband like that. And in addition, Paul and I have played chamber music together really since I was a teenager and he was just in college. And we've always enjoyed playing music together with friends. It's been a regular part of our playing string quartets together once a week was something we did for 45 years.
So that has to be a passion.
It is.
In
It
music
absolutely
to do
is
that.
a passion for both of us.
So teaching doesn't pay much. How about like working for an orchestra? I know the one you have is sort of like part-time job. Does that make a little bit different if people work for I guess a full-time kind of orchestra?
Yes, that's a very good question. It really varies on the location of the orchestra and also on how famous and big the orchestra is. So the people that get into the Baltimore Symphony or the National Symphony or the Philadelphia Orchestra or the Minnesota Symphony make very, very good livings, very good salaries, starting salaries, you know, over $80,000 or $90,000 a year, very good. And the principal players might make more than that. But if you're in a regional orchestra in a smaller town or in a different part of the country, in a different state, then the salaries are not very high. Teaching can pay quite a bit better, actually, so that even the teachers that play in the National Philharmonic make more money teaching than they would by the hour playing in National Philharmonic. But we all love performing and playing great music so much that we're willing to do that
Right.
in order to have a chance to perform. So the part-time orchestra doesn't pay anything like National Symphony or Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, although some of our players substitute for those orchestras. So you could do every concert that the National Philharmonic gives and not really make more than $9,000 a year because it's that part-time unless you were perhaps the concertmaster. And you could do much, much better financially just teaching. But most people just love playing so much that they're willing to have a balance of the two kinds of work.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad you get a chance to both teach
Right.
and then perform because I think it's a passion of love for the music.
Right, it is, it really is.
So throughout your career, what do you think is the most challenging?
The most challenging, that's a difficult question because I have enjoyed every part of this career. So you could say, well, it's challenging to work with a learning disabled student, which I have done. Or you could say it's challenging to work with an adult who has never played the instrument before and you're trying to teach someone who's 60 years old how to hold her instrument and play. That's quite challenging. It's also challenging to play music that you haven't been given before, or that you don't know, or that's
piece.
modern. Then you have to work, then that's challenging. But none of it is negatively challenging.
It's just
It's
enjoying.
just enjoyment, right?
Yes, and then I know the feeling of like conquered something, and
Right.
then it's like, yeah, that's cool.
Right.
Anything you really don't like about your job? I know you love your job. Is there anything, any small aspect that?
I wish I didn't need to practice as much to be good on my instrument. That was really the reason I didn't go to music school, was I had practiced so much as a young person. I didn't want to go to college and not have a chance to learn other things and practice and just be in a practice room practicing. So it's still a challenge, but I have learned how to enjoy aspects of practicing even now.
Oh my. Oh, well, I guess that's one part which is very important for being a musician.
It really is.
So if there's someone who's really interested in music, in any kind of instrument, and would like to pursue being a professional musician, what's the advice you give them?
It's interesting that you ask that, because so often we music teachers get together and the issue is, what do we say to kids? And what we usually tell them is, if that's all you want to do, if that is your passion, go for it. Get the best training you can and go for it. But if you think there are other things you might be interested in, give those other things a chance too.
You think that that's sort of like, it's not really for everyone.
Right,
You really need to have the passion, kind of like pursue it.
right.
Especially with the, I guess, the kind of pay you get.
Right.
It's
And the
nice.
challenges in finding a job.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we did not really specifically talk about that. You mentioned about that your audition. Normally, how do people find their first job, sort of, if they
They're
really want to
posted.
pursue it?
Usually musicians
Oh,
join the
really?
Musicians Union, and then the jobs are posted in the magazine.
Okay.
So that and when you go into a community, you will hear that there are orchestras. You can contact the personnel people, inquire about openings, and also the union has showcases twice a year where you can play, and all the contractors in the area that hire for freelance work and for orchestras come and listen to people play at these showcases. At those showcases, people have to play a set piece that they select and also do some sight reading.
Do people? I mean, in this profession, is there sort of like internship, or people could volunteer, say, I want to perform at certain places to kind of get discovered or something like that?
Yes, in a way. There's no such thing as an internship, but there are volunteer organizations like the Friday Morning Music Club where professional musicians can join. They join by audition, and then they get a chance to give concerts where they play just one piece on a program. So they get a chance to try out programs. And there are non-professional groups in the area, community orchestras, where very often professional players play so that they have a chance to develop their skills, get known by conductors, play music, and then perhaps be experienced enough to take an audition with a professional group.
And I guess, did you ever get stage fright?
I did, playing solos, never for chamber music or playing in orchestra, but I decided at one point that I should get better at playing solos, and I actually joined the Friday Morning Music Club to get a chance to practice doing solos, because a teacher said to me, if you're going to teach, you should have experience performing solo works. So I did, and I learned how not to be as nervous.
Oh, good. So I guess practice actually does count.
It does count.
So, and also I guess perform more and more,
Yes.
kind of get you more comfortable with the environment.
Exactly.
Oh, wonderful,
Exactly.
Judy. Thank you for being with us today and share with your experience and all the good advice for being a professional musician.
You're very welcome. I really enjoyed being here.
Thank you. This concludes today's program. Thanks to our guest, Mrs. Judy Silverman, and thank you for joining us. If you have any feedback or comments, or if you would like to share your experience, please email us at qip.career.choices@gmail.com. We will see you next time on Career Choices.